tell me a little bit about yourself and your practice and how you started to do what you do. And yeah.
My name is Alexandra. I'm an arts professional. I have been working at Tate for the last couple of years, and I honestly worked from curatorial department to development department, you name it. I did lots of different projects. And recently, I started to, do my own thing, which is a blog about the correlation between art and perfumery. So I basically review the exhibitions by pairing them with different perfumes. It was a long way coming to it, but it was an exciting one.
And how did you first get the idea for the practice that you do with matching perfumes and scents with art and movies and everything?
I think it started when I was a kid, because I watched lots of, how you just watch lots of advertisements and you never really pay any attention to it. And I was mesmerized by the fact that the only adverts with no words were perfumery adverts. Like they managed to just use the visual to sort of make you feel something. There would be maybe one word at the end, j'adore, like this is a new perfume, but it was enough. They build a whole meaning around the scent just by using strong visuals, and it really resonated. Like I really liked they didn't have to say much, to express that. So I guess it sort of stayed with me through the years, and I was always very interested about how our scents, correlate, about how we perceive certain things through scent. And that's exactly where the idea came from. I thought, how can I actually think and explore people's perception through sense by using something I already have a lot of knowledge about? And so, that's basically how it started. And then every time I try a new perfume, I sort of a picture pops in my head, and I sort of instantly already know what to pair it with. Or sometimes vice versa. Sometimes I try a perfume and I'm thinking, oh, I know how it's going to look like, or I see a picture and I'm like, oh, I know how it would smell. So I think it's all like drugging from this unconscious, scent memory that sort of stayed with me throughout the years.
You kind of mentioned that you take a perfume and then a picture pops into your head. So is that how you usually match them, or is there times where you see something visual and then you come up with a scent?
Sometimes it just comes to me, like honestly, mostly maybe for intuition. I think it's a very interesting like way of doing it because I have so many options to choose from, and it can be misleading at the same time as it is an advantage. It could be a struggle as well because so many things to pick from. But I must say, I think, well, because I work at Tate and because I sort of see and go to all of the current exhibitions anyway, and I always have, I think seeing what's important in the art world today really helps me also shape like the way I think about perfumery. I think it's also every scent we sort of already have it linked to a certain memory, right? Everybody do, and I think it's the same with me. Only I sort of imagine new memories. So when I do try a perfume or see a picture, I sort of like create, this like pairing in my head instantly. But I can't tell you where it starts. I can't tell you if it starts with a picture or a scent. Um, because and also I met so many artists actually incorporating using scent into their practice nowadays too, and I don't think they start with an artwork and then create a scent. I think it depends, it depends on the feeling, depends on your perception, and the way you want, the audience, how deep you want the audience to experience something, basically.
Why do you think people resonate with it so much? These are such big senses for us. There's sight and there's smell. These are, I think, perhaps the most memories are held in the smell and then the sight. So why do you think combining these two together is so appealing to people and it causes such strong and unique emotions?
I think it's because, like I said, we already sort of have this pairings fixed in our unconscious. So I think what I sort of try to do is just help people rediscover those pairings. It's very interesting because it can be a very like deep contrast in the way we perceive things based on that. For example, you can wear a beautiful perfume or the weather can be amazing. It could be like scent, after rain in the spring, but somebody just broke your heart and you feel miserable, right? So it's not always that obvious in the way that memory actually links to a certain scent. Sometimes it would be a scent that will make me feel really happy, but will make you feel awful, and it's not always that, it's not always that obvious, why, obviously bad scent or obviously good. And that's what I really like about it as well. And I think that's what resonates with people as well. I think that, the open interpretation of it, the ability to have their own perception of it, of this pairing, because I'm not really telling them, oh, this is exactly how it smells. I'm saying, this is how I imagine it. How do you imagine it? It's funny because when I started to do it, I sort of didn't know how much the perfumery scene would actually appreciate that, because it's also quite like a closed club. Like art world is a closed club, perfumery world is a closed club. So I wasn't sure, but actually I had such an amazing amount of like engagement with that. Everybody really appreciated it. So yeah.
Whenever you create like any new match, any new piece of work, is there anything specific you want to achieve with each new pairing?
I wouldn't say I want to achieve something, but I do definitely want to reclaim the word immersive, because I do think that, over the last, I don't know, decade, every time we say immersive exhibition, the first thing that usually pops to mind is those, spaces with projectors, which just project art onto the walls and people just sitting on a cushions, like in the middle of the room, which I find really funny because there's nothing immersive about it. So what I'm trying to achieve, besides, sort of combining, like you said, those two very closed worlds together, which is a challenge, and I love a challenge, is to sort of reclaim, the immersiveness of this experience, to deepen it.
Rather than telling fixed stories, your work uses perfume to open up new layers of perception for people. Do you think there's a specific thing that a person would experience with a specific type of your work? And do you go into creating your work with an idea that someone's going to experience something specific, or does it fluctuate a bit more?
I actually think that the beauty of it is that it's very open to any interpretations. I don't really expect anyone to perceive it in any way. And a lot of the time, it really surprises me with the way people actually react to the pairings. When I'm making it now, I'm sort of like very free of um, the expectation of it. I'm trying to free myself from expectation. I'm just enjoying it. And it's really funny because now, speaking with like curators, like curating our exhibitions, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna do the perfume pairing. They're like, oh, really? I'm so excited. I want to see it.
That's great. And like when you mentioned that you review exhibitions with perfumes and people like start to get excited, even after I look through your page and I look through some of your matches, I started to kind of, whenever I like watch a movie or go to an exhibition, I had this question in the back of my mind after that of, oh, I wonder what perfume this is. I wonder what scent this is. And I've never had it before. So it was so interesting that your page kind of just inspired this new question in me of, oh, there's this whole other sense that is so unexplored when it comes to all types of creativity. So, do you think your work will unlock that for other people? Because I know it did that for me, but is that something that you thought about?
It really makes me happy you saying that, you now sort of have it in the back of your mind. That's really happy. It makes me happy because I had it all of my life, and I didn't, I didn't know really how to shape it into a practice until recently. I do think that it would be amazing if it sort of opened a deeper, level to the way we see art and the way we experience perfumery. It's amazing. I can give you a really good example. I have a friend she's an incredible photographer, but also she's a perfumer. And she used to be an architect, and she told me this thing which stuck with me as well. The way I see it is, it's like, uh, as I when I was an architect, I was like you building something around the sense or around the artwork. So it's basically like creating a meaning around it. And this is ultimately why museums exist. They create meanings around artworks because, without, hopefully, without over explaining it. So that's exactly what I want people to see and feel. I really hope that it will bring like a deeper level of engagement with art, because that's ultimately what we all need after, especially after the pandemic.
After seeing some of your work, I want to purchase, I think, 20 new perfumes. and just match them to different parts of my life. And I'm like, wow, it actually, I think like also motivated me a bit because I'm a very one perfume for winter, one for summer kind of person. Like I found my scent, I don't mix it. But then after I looked at all that, I was like, you know what? It's so interesting because maybe some days you don't feel like this specific perfume. You feel like a bit more like lavendery and flowery, and sometimes you want it to be a bit sharper.
Can't lie, I wear a different perfume every day because like every day like my mood is different. But totally, you know, like that's exactly what I think is especially niche perfumery, like indie perfumery. Now having met quite a few perfumery brand owners, that's exactly their goal. Coming back to your question of how this idea popped to my head, partially was because um, a lot of the time when reading a description of a perfume, we read about notes, right? Oh, it's oud, it's rose, it's ladon, it's that, and I realized that I can't connect with this. You know, I can't just imagine it. I need to create a meaning around this sort of like list of notes, you know. And so thinking about it also got me to think that, oh, many people who are not into perfume, so you know, who exactly doing that, so they have like two perfumes or one signature perfume, how can I, you know, make them engage with this sort of fragrance world a bit more?
I also love that you kind of give light to some independent perfumeries and independent perfume brands. I also think that's great. I think because when you think perfume, you always think so many of these like just big brands that do kind of like everything. But then there's so many other unique scents. And I think for people who don't necessarily know that or have the time to kind of go deeper into the research of it, your page can actually be such a great starting point.
Also, you know, in today's world, sustainability really matters to me. I do want to write and, you know, collaborate with brands that are sustainable, and that are sustainably sourcing, you know, the notes for their perfumes. I do find it really important. But also, the funny thing is that many niche brands, very, I don't know, from very small to bigger ones that we might have encountered, um, there are scents that you would never sort of imagine existing in the fragrance bottle. Like so many things that will unlock your memory, but also big brands doesn't always mean good quality at all. Bigger bunches mean less quality of ingredient. So that's exactly why I'm aiming for these sort of smaller brands, and I do want to promote them as much as I can.
You kind of mentioned before, you talked about sustainability and smaller brands, but just in general, I think matching something so personal to people as scent, it's such an honest practice. How do you practice this honesty? How do you approach every match and project that you have with just this honesty that is required for this specific kind of process?
It's funny enough because I think I was always like a very straightforward person, and I think throughout my life people actually didn't like it about me. So I think I decided that it's going to be my weapon from now on. I think it's because I just wouldn't be able to do it if I lied. We could talk about perception of it all for ages, but ultimately there are bad scents and there is bad art. You know, it can be flat, it can be decorative, it could be uninteresting, it can not evoke any emotion.
There is a level of like this honesty that's immediately felt through your work because I think people can still tell. So you have been doing this for some time, and are there any parts of the process that you still struggle with?
I think something I do struggle with is exactly what I mentioned, is when something just doesn't make me feel anything at all. In which case I just can't, I'm probably going to drop it and I'm not going to do any pairing because that's going to be unfair. Um, but also, I mean, you know, perfumery world is very, very interesting and very, very deep. And I still a beginner in it. I mean, if the art world, I can totally tell you I'm not a beginner at all. I have like two higher degrees, you know, I've read lots of books, I've worked in the industry. With when it comes to perfumery, I'm a very, very passionate amateur. I still want to, you know, I want to get my degree to know how to create the perfume. But that's exactly why I'm not, you know, I'm not selling you the courses on how to create a perfume based on a film, because that would be unfair. Coming back to honesty, you know, that's exactly why maybe my interpretations of it are so honest, and maybe that's why people can resonate, because maybe they feel like they're growing with me in this sort of area. because I keep learning and learning and learning about it every day. But I'm, and I don't think I'll ever stop.
And just to kind of like talk about what you mentioned a little previously, but pivot from this practice to kind of your experience in the art world in general. And if you can tell me a little bit about your work in the art world and what are you doing now, and kind of how it informs your practice of matching scents, but also in general, just kind of about your job at Tate.
An important story to mention is the way I started my work at Tate, because that will totally make sense as if why I decided to deal with perfumery as well. Um, it was like my first job in Tate. I'm very young, very naive. I just don't understand what's happening, but I'm very happy to be there because I always wanted to work at Tate since I was maybe like 16. I remember when I was like 18 or so, drunkenly at the party, I told all of my friends that I'm gonna move to London and work at Tate, and everybody laughed at me. But basically, coming back to my first job, I worked in a public program, and I did tours, private tours for blind people around our exhibition. I did one of my first tours. I was very nervous because, public speaking, like 30 people, and trying to make it as accessible as possible, of course, but also just normally nervous, as anybody would be. And I remember it was Kosama Mirror Rooms. My first sort of idea was to just talk about the artist, about the exhibition, about what her art was about, and because this is basically what you learn, this text, to just tell people. Halfway through my speech, a blind woman, she stopped me. She was like, no, 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 I don't want to hear about that. Can you tell me about what you feel when you see these artworks? And that really, made me speechless, and that really touched me because it really taught me about I'm like, in no position to assume how people want to experience it. And I think that's also bring me to this understanding through this experience about, oh yeah, I want to do it, but I want to do it and in no way explain to people how they should, encounter artworks or perfumery. But that was sort of my first job, and then I worked behind the scenes and collection care, which is basically about how everybody's making sure the collection stays, well. And then I worked in curatorial department, and I did big projects. They also sort of bring me back to the scent memory because I was on curatorial team for Mirli Commission for Turbine Hall last year, which opened like last Friday, so exactly a year ago, really. And that was like a very big installation with a turbine, but it was spinning and dripping those liquids, basically almost resembling, I don't know, all liquids in our body that we could like merge together, and then we would hang the skin. So it was like a very like long-term project. It was incredible because one of the first pairings like that popped to my mind was when I worked on this project because looking at this quite grotesque but incredible amazing artwork and those liquids dripping down, so many ideas for how the liquid should smell like popped to my head. And I was like, oh yeah, you know what? I'm gonna post that. It also resonated with people. Like artists would message me about coming and seeing and smelling the artwork, which was really funny. It was like, well, you can try smelling it. It doesn't really smell like much. And so now, in my current position, I work in development, which is basically a fundraising department. So it's fundraising for all sorts of different projects that we're doing. Being in the heart of it all really helps shaping the way I see art and the way I perceive art as well, which I think really helps me in my practice with perfume.
Based kind of on your work and on your personal experience at Tate and on your work with artists and perfumery and in general the creative industry, what do you think are some things, if there are any, that you can think of that kind of stump sometimes the art and creative industry and stop it from growing and developing?
I think it's unwillingness to change and adapt to new times, to new generations, and accepting the fact that there could be new crazy ideas. But also, I think it all links back to the pandemic, where throughout the course of the pandemic, the art world obviously was not an essential part of life. And I think going through it and like audiences realizing that after pandemic ended, people very slowly started to go back into museums. And I think adapting, to those changes and actually achieving a new level of integration with your, like, communication and, you know just connection with your audiences. This is what's really important. I think that's exactly where I was thinking about this deepened perspective with the sense, because this is a deeper, communication between the artwork and the audiences.
And throughout your experiences with any kind of your creative work, has there ever been some advice that you were given that was just so bad? And something that, like, you
Yeah.
would want other people in the industry, if they ever receive similar type of advice, to just avoid.
I don't think it's an advice per se. I think it's like an opinion, which thank God I didn't listen to. It was like early in my career when I was working with a creative I really admired. Um, and that was older than me, like much older. And they told me something that, I was like, ew. They said that I couldn't achieve something at that age that I was because they didn't achieve it when they were the same age, which I think is a lot of crap. I'm sorry, but like, it doesn't matter. There's never, it's the same as like, it's never too late and it's never too early. And I feel like we never say that. It's never too early for the creative expression. And and I'm so happy I didn't listen. They basically said I couldn't, achieve a certain, I wanted to create a project when they said, oh yeah, well, I had the same idea when I was your age, but I didn't, I couldn't do it, so you will not be able to do it. And I really, really want to wish, I want to say to everybody, whoever encountered the same sort of pressure or, the same sort of ageism, to just, ignore it. It absolutely doesn't matter. It absolutely doesn't matter. And yeah, just, avoid people like that. Even if you admire their creative practice, sometimes they can just be very egoistical about certain things.
This kind of advice just comes from such a malicious place of, like, even a little bit of jealousy that there's this young person who's so ambitious and believes in themselves that they might achieve something that that person has not achieved at their age. And then they start to discourage you. Honestly, yeah, I think I know a couple of people, and I myself have been told that a couple of times, and it's a really good example of a horrible advice.
And as a young person, I can imagine that under this pressure many people would actually listen and believe that, which is really, makes me really sad. And so I want to tell everybody who's listening to us right now, please don't listen to this.
One final question for you, and then I'm gonna let you go. So, based like through your work with Tate, your work with perfumes, with meeting different perfumers, what are some of the most unexpected things that you've learned and you've discovered about the industry as a whole, about these two industries that seem so closed off? And I think very interestingly, like, you have this kind of insight into both of them. So, what are some of the interesting things you learned that you think people who just want to get into either of those industries would love to know, and maybe it would be useful for them to know?
I think some of the things that I'm going to say now are could be obvious, but they're not that obvious. um, First of all, that all of these people that you think are hard to be friends with or professional with, or just get into their circle, they're just people. Absolutely nothing about them is really intimidating. It's all in your head. It's true, and I know it because I've been through thousands of interviews, and I, interviewed myself, and I understand this level of pressure, especially in the art world, because of this competition, this crazy competition. Um, I really came to understand that a lot of, people I work with and people I worked with, they are absolutely, they're real. They're not like they're real people with real emotions, with real problems, and they are really not as scary. Another discovery I would want to talk about is that I think it's very going to be black and white when I'm, about to say, but it's true. I think there are two main kinds of people in those communities: is a dreamer and a doer. And it's very important to establish who you think you are. If you're a dreamer, you need somebody around you, and you need people around you who are going to be doers. And if you're a doer, follow the dreamers. They're gonna lead the way. They're gonna, lead your creative they're going to listen to you in your creative input, but at the same time you do need them, to achieve higher like creative goals. What another fascinating thing, I guess, and the last one I'm going to mention is that what really I think makes this community absolutely incredible and so unique is that you are literally working with people who have magic powers of predicting what's going to be relevant 10 years from now. um, I don't know how they do it. I'm only learning. I really, really want to have this skill. I don't know if they're born with this skill or if they, acquire it as they go through life. But I think it's absolutely incredible because as like a director of a museum or a person who's building a collection or art advisor, you have to have this quality of almost like predicting the future of like what is going to be relevant. So yeah, so I think that's very exciting. When I meet people like that, that's I think the most inspiring thing ever.
I think you are a little bit predicting the future with what you're doing right now because I think matching all the senses and having this fully immersive experience is the future of kind of the arts and creative world. It's so great. So it was so great speaking to you and kind of getting to know this on the level where you're creating it because I know that in 5 years when you're matching giant perfumes with like incredible private works, I'm not gonna be able to get a hang of you. So like I'm glad that I got to talk to you.
Thank you so much as well for inviting me to talk about this practice. I'm actually also thinking about doing my own workshops about the pairings. So maybe we'll see each other then.